Okay.
Good help's hard to find, and we're living proof, so there you go.
And some of us help are hard to find. So
yeah. And that picture may look better than looking at us anyway. So what the heck?
For sure.
And Mike and Cheyenne, it's not always like this. It's, sorry.
Okay, well, good evening and welcome a little late to the April 2023 meeting of the Rocky Mountain Railroad Club. And so I'll first start off and say thank you for your patience with me and my slowness and learning. And I've finally got the membership cards printed and I should be mailing those out tomorrow. And for those of you that are here tonight, if you've renewed, let me know and I'll search through the box here and find your card. And if you're also a printed copy of the rail report, I'll get that to you as well because I've got those here and still haven't mailed those out. And Dave got me some envelopes so I can mail everything out, and I got all the stamps and everything from Denny and got all the labels printed. So I'm well on my way to success. Sorry. What could go wrong?
I think we should give him a raise. Yeah.
Well, I had a boss one time who said, "Yo, you want a raise? Stand up and bend over. I'll give you a raise with my boot." I was like, "Whoa, okay."
Yikes.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thankfully, it wasn't a boss real long. So
yeah, this is a family show. So
yes. That's why I said boot instead of something else. Yeah, we've had it's just been busy trying to get all the membership stuff straightened out, and we've had a number of our people have traveled a bit and just trying to get all the records straightened out. And so I'll get everything mailed out. And then if you do end up not getting a membership card, please email me or the rails at RockyMountainRailroadClub.org and let us know, and we'll look for your membership and try to make it right. And if you haven't renewed, you can renew late, and we'll get you somewhere in there. So I'm around. I guess over to you, Dave, for a while because I'm tired of talking. Yes, thank you for reminding me. Got anybody new over on this side or visitors that haven't been here for a while? And okay. Richard, been here several times. All right. Yeah. Well, welcome.
Glad you're here again.
And then on this side, I think everybody looks fairly familiar over there.
Right. Brian, do you have something that you want to announce and show us today?
Yeah, Brian's got two dome cars that he's painted up there.
Okay.
And I guess I'll do a little plug here now. Occasionally we'll get members that are local that have passed away and their widows or significant others kind of contact us and say, "Hey, I've got all this books and other stuff that they collected and not sure what to do with it." And so we are able to take donations on a limited basis because we only have so much room down at World Headquarters in our storage unit. But on the back table here, I brought part of the stuff from the Bob Wilson collection. He passed away in 2019, and his widow Susan was nice enough to contact me, and I went over and picked up some stuff, gave her a donation, and then Kirk Thode as well. And then she got me the rest of the stuff when she was needing to get out of her place to close. So I've got some of it here tonight, and it's kind of the table there for grabs, or if you want to make a small donation, we could put that towards our historical foundation to help fund our annual grant program. And I'll have Nathan talk about that a little later here. And I will also probably bring some stuff to our club picnic, which is on May 14th, which is also Mother's Day. We're sorry that was the only time we could get out there with steam, but we'll be starting around, is it 3 p.m. for the meal? Roughly, yeah. Yeah, and so if you haven't signed up for that yet, we do have it available through PayPal on our website. And then if you could also email us and let us know your choice of brisket or chicken, and that way we can get a somewhat accurate count to let the caterer know roughly how much you should bring of each thing. And for those of you that have been in the past, it's very good barbecue, and he also sells his own barbecue sauce and has some available for purchase there for $10. And Nathan and I have both taken home the hot sauce in the years past, and it's quite good. So we'll probably have some items available maybe for kind of raffle or something at the picnic this year. So if you're there, we'll hand out raffle tickets and get some stuff into other people's hands instead of it rotting away in a storage unit or somebody's, such as myself's, basement. Over to you, Dave.
Yeah, speaking of people that have passed on, I guess in the last few weeks, we lost longtime member Frank Gill. I think he was about 98 years old, and I think that he was due to be membership card number 8 this year. I think I remember him telling me or telling us in past years that he grew up out there in Arvada, maybe in the Ralston Valley, pretty close to the Denver and Salt Lake main line, even before it was the Rio Grande. So sorry to have lost Frank. I know he and his family have been to many of our banquets and brought the grandkids and all that. Andy mentioned that the newsletters are coming soon. They're real late this month, and I'll take the blame for that because we're still sort of learning our way through our new editing program on that. And I had some of it done and then some of it got erased. And so my apologies for that. We will try to have the May issue out more timely. Speaking of May, we do want you guys to get your reservations in for the banquet/picnic, which, like he said, was on the 14th at about 3:00. You have your choice of brisket or chicken, $42. And we need to have those reservations into the club's mailbox by May the 5th so that we can give the numbers to our caterer so he can, start cooking. It's just that simple. So, and then also when you get out to the Railroad Museum that day, you will just check in at the regular ticket window and you'll get like a wristband. We haven't figured out what color they're going to be yet, but you'll get a wristband and that should allow you to ride the train that we will have. And you might even be able to ride some of the earlier trains in the day if they haven't sold tickets and sold them out. They usually sell tickets for their train rides there around the museum, but if they haven't got all the seats full, we might be able to get some extra rides. And then that wristband also will get you your food. And I believe that even after we get our ride, I think the train crew out there will probably try to run at least our same train around for photo opportunities, or they might even be able to put us together a different train for a different look for different photos. So, yeah, I think there's a good chance that both the engine 491 and engine 20 will probably both be hot that day. I think 346 is down for some work, but they always try to make a special effort to do something a little bit better and different for our members. So hope as many of you as possible can join us on Mother's Day. Take mom out early or bring her to the Railroad Museum. What the heck, because every mother loves trains. Most of you guys have a blue name tag like this, but if you never got one, see me after the meeting and I'll get your name and I'll make you one of these. And then also, I think we've told you that you can get one of these fancy schmancy, engraved magnet back things, but they're about $20, but these are free. So, okay. I talked about the picnic. We talked about that other thing. If everybody would put your phones on silent, it will not embarrass us so much during the show. And what else? Anything else, Andy? The grant program. Nathan gets to come up and talk because Nathan loves to speak to crowds. He just loves that. Ladies and gentlemen, past president Nathan Holmes.
Thanks for the intro, Dave. Yeah, I love public speaking so much. So, as I mentioned last month, it's grant season again. For those who don't know, our 501c3 arm, the Rocky Mountain Railroad Historical Foundation, gives away up to 5 $1,000 grants every year to generally small organizations focused on railway history, education, preservation, and the like. Hi, Pat. Speaking of perennial winners, the Como folks are always well represented in the grant program. They've taken advantage of it nearly every year. But we'd like to see some new blood, some new projects as well. So we're strongly encouraging you, if you know a preservation organization that's looking for a small grant for something they're doing this summer, encourage them to visit our website. All the details are out there. It's incredibly easy. One-page description of, what your organization is, what your project is, what your budget is, and kind of a plug for your organization of why you think we should invest in your project. Obviously, our preference is for projects that are near and dear to our members, things that are within the Rocky Mountain West, but we will consider worthy projects from all across the country. So if you're out there and you belong to a preservation organization, you think, man, I really could use a grant to help fund some project we've got going this summer, visit our website, shoot us an email. They're absolutely due no later than April 30th. So don't delay. We're not like the IRS. We won't fine you. We just won't consider you. So
no free money. Is that what you're
no free money. I mean, I don't know how much I have to stand up and say free money over here, but apparently I need to allot this year because applications are a little slow. So yeah, well, that's pretty typical. Usually they all pour in the last week. So get them in.
I guess that means that these restoration organizations have too much money because they don't need our mini grants. So, yeah. All right. Now that we've rambled for about 15 minutes, I probably should introduce our headliner act.
I got one more thing.
Okay.
Speaking of Frank Gill's passing, as I was looking through the membership numbers and rechecking them, triple checking them, and trying to figure out who all's renewed and who hasn't, there was a couple of them kind of in the top 20, and I thought, haven't seen these renew. I wonder if they're still around. And sure enough, I Googled at least 3 of them. Well, 2 in the top 20 and another one, and found that they had passed on and found obituaries various places. And one of them I think would have been number 5. So if anybody has heard of anybody passing on and you haven't seen it in the Braille report, please do let us know, email us or something. That way we can recognize them that they were a member, and then we can also put them on our list of those that have passed on so that we don't hound them to get their membership renewed, and we kind of know that, they were remembered and that kind of thing. So we'd appreciate that, and just my own personal thing, but I'm sure other membership folks would appreciate that as well, just because just good to know. And as it is, we typically lose about 30 to 40 memberships every year, either people forgetting or people getting older and not remembering, or not in well health or passing on. And so we just trying to keep our numbers up, but we do realize it's kind of a dying breed of us people that are into trains, and we're trying to get younger people involved, but just it's difficult to, and because everything's free and on the internet anymore. So it's just kind of the reality of it. But we're here for you to give you free shows. And we're worth every penny that you pay. So our presenter tonight is Michael Pannell, who lives up in Cheyenne. And I will ask Mike to give us a little background as to how he found his way into Cheyenne. I think Mike's originally from England, and I probably should have asked him that a long time ago. Maybe I never did, Mike, but if you're with us, why don't you go ahead and start your program, sir?
Okay, thank you. I will attempt to do that. How's that? So yeah, thank you very much for inviting me to speak with you this evening. I apologize for not being there in person. I would have much preferred to have been there in person, but with the way the weather has been up here this winter and the current project that we're working on and the contract we're working on, we're somewhat behind. And it's just when the sun's out and it's above freezing, then it's got to be a long work day. So that's what we've been doing. But thank you for inviting me. And just as a short history, because obviously I'm not, that's not a Cheyenne accent that you're hearing. It's more southerly than Cheyenne, but I got interested in trains from a young boy in the south of England. And I'll give you a few photographs just to show you just a little bit of a bio as to how I got to be here. Let's see if this works. Let's see. There we go. So in 1986, a group of us in Hastings in England decided that we would try and save our local trains that were going to be scrapped. The uniqueness about these trains was that the railway line from Hastings to London, at least part of the railway line from Hastings to Tunbridge, which was built in 1855, was built by a contractor who defrauded the railroad or the railway, and they built tunnels on the line which appeared to be the correct width. But in theory, they actually had less linings inside than they should have done. So after a few years, the first tunnel collapsed and they had to introduce more linings to the tunnels, which then forever after made the tunnels too narrow for standard trains. So for a 40-mile section of line, they had to build special steam locomotives, special rolling stock, and then when the steam was phased out, they had to build special diesel trains, which made it a very expensive piece of railway. So we grew to love these trains, as you do, and when these trains were going to be scrapped in 1986, which was, this picture here shows the last run of one of these trains from London to Hastings, and me when I was about 20. So we got together, we formed a group, we decided we'd approach the railways to try and purchase at least one example of one of these trains. And it just grew and grew, and we ended up with 2 complete 6-car diesel passenger trains, and plus some spare coaches in the end as well. And then we also ended up with the maintenance facility that those trains was built for those trains in 1957 as well. So we ended up with all these trains plus a 250,000 square foot maintenance facility to keep them in, which is somewhat unusual. Normally you start off with a train in a field somewhere and you have nowhere to put it, and that's kind of the way things go. So currently the train that we bought, we have 6 coaches restored. So 1 complete diesel train is restored, and the maintenance facility is used for looking after trains that are owned by national railway companies. And our vintage train, which is now 65 years old, resides in there and is mainline registered and is out on the main line doing excursions several times a year, carrying passengers all over the country. Fortunately, in the UK, you're allowed to run practically whatever you like on the main line, as long as it's certified and has a train crew that are trained to operate it. So that's where we are with those, and that's how I got to be involved in railway preservation in the first place. So this was our train last year on a trip down to Hampshire onto a preserved railway line from the main line, and a few of us that started the group. So that's kind of a short bio. When I arrived in the United States, we emigrated in 2005 and moved to Arizona from the south coast of England, which, as you can imagine, was very similar. You know, not much of a change for us. And I fell into a job there restoring Second World War aircraft and jets, which is something I'd never done before. And I did that for a few years until we moved once again and came to Cheyenne, which was where we always wanted to live. And there's a view of one of the planes we restored, which is currently flying out of Seattle. So when we moved to Cheyenne, I went looking for a passenger car that I had seen when I first came to visit the USA in 1991. And we were just driving around with friends in this neighborhood, and I saw this familiar outline of a clear-story roof, and it just stuck in my memory. So when we moved in 2007 to Cheyenne, I went looking for this car, hoping it was still there, and it was. So it turned out to be on the condemnation list once again. The local hospital had bought the land, and they were going to demolish all the houses on the land, and the railroad car, which had been a house for 54 years, was going to be demolished. So my first port of call really was to try and find a number above the doorway on the car to give us some kind of history. And that number, 513, led me to, via historians in the area, led me to realize that it was CNS 513 from actually going back to 1887. Obviously not a CNS car in 1887. So the car's history is a Pullman car built in 1887 for the Denver, Texas and Fort Worth Railroad. It was ordered by Grenville Dodge himself, and it was part of the very first train between Fort Worth and Denver in March of 1888. So I inquired of the owner, said, what's going to happen to the car? And the somewhat inimitable words that I've got used to since then, he came back to me with, well, if you want it, you can have it. So there was no question in my mind that we had to try and save this car. It was clearly a sleeping beauty, and we had to try and do something about it. So over the course of the next few months, I managed to find a house mover that was willing to take the task on of trying to move a car, something he'd never done before. And we finally got it moved to a new location in, I think probably March of 2008, maybe April of 2008, when we finally got the car up in the air enough to slide a trailer frame underneath, a house frame, and move the car about 5 or 6 miles across Cheyenne out to the east side of Cheyenne, where we started preliminary work to restore it. Now, some of the club members remember visiting this car when it was east of Cheyenne. It was a miserable rainy day. You were all on a bus, and I believe you had to cut some kind of tour short or something. And Dave called me and said, could we come and look at your car? And we all crammed into this car on this rotten day and had a look around the car. So some of you may remember it from those years. So there's another couple of views of us moving it. As we started stripping the paint off, we started to find some really incredible historical artifacts underneath the paint. This one in particular on the only remaining original door, where it says built by the Pullman Company, Pullman, Illinois, which was a lovely thing to find. The interior of the car is cherry. The ceilings are veneered oak, and the exterior is poplar, as per most passenger cars of the period. So the interior of the car, as we received it, was completely painted, emulsioned in white paint, basically, and drywall. So there were no windows really showing, maybe 3 or 4 windows. The rest was drywalled, and you couldn't see any of the interior features at all. So when we started stripping the paint off the ceilings, I was astounded to see this pattern coming back through the ceilings. And this is the original aluminium leaf from 1887, put on by hand, and also hand lined as well. And then we found on the edges of some of these panels that they're actually signed by the painters at Pullman who actually painted the ceilings. You can see also the C&S scroll work there and its last number in service, which was 513. The car had been through several owners: Denver, Texas, and Fort Worth, Union Pacific, Denver, and Gulf, and Colorado and Southern, and it had 2 numbers in the Colorado and Southern era, number 57 and then number 513. It then became a work car in around 1922, and then it was used as moved up to Cheyenne as a home for railroad workers because property was too expensive for them to buy. So this is the process of stripping the ceilings. They all have to be done by hand. You can't use any chemicals on them whatsoever. You'll notice the square in the middle is where the oil lights were, oil lamps, and later gas lamps. And you can see the green paint that the C&S love painting on the ceilings of their cars, which they happily painted over all the silver and aluminium relief in 1906 and painted them green. So it takes about 40 hours per ceiling to actually remove all of that paint. The first layers of paint come off with a scraper, and the next final layers, which were painted and varnished over, you have to use a razor blade. So it's a laborious process, but the results are really spectacular. We've had amazing help from many historians. Jim Ehrenberger has been incredible. Probably the most amazing historian we've had help from is Hull Wagner, who's so famous and yet he's so not timid, but he's so I'm trying to think of the word. He's just such a nice guy. He will willingly share information with you and look up information for you and do everything he can to help you further the history of these cars that we're finding, whether it be Union Pacific, whether it be C&S, whatever it is. He's been the most amazing help to us, and he's come up with original paperwork for the car 513 that we have, original shop paperwork that his father saved from shops in Denver, which irreplaceable. You never find a passenger car with original shop records. It's really unusual. So there's great people to thank for where we are now with this car. This picture here is a picture of 57 or one of its sisters on an outing from Denver with the Gates Rubber Company to somewhere near Greeley on some kind of works outing in 1910. So that's the story of 57. At the moment it sits in the silo, which we have in Cheyenne, where we keep the trains, and it's quite happy and safe, but we have some big plans in the pipeline for it. So it may eventually move downtown and be on display in an appropriate location in the town and on trucks, which we have found for it as well. So it's a bit of a sleeping giant, but it will find a place on public display at some point soon. So our second finding was a CA caboose, Union Pacific, which we found east of town. And you can see the kind of condition it was in. You notice that it's also not square as you look through it. It's got quite a nice twist to it, which they often have, these wooden cars. And this was in 2012. We got made aware of a caboose that was in dire need of attention or demolition, one or the other. And we went to look for it, and we spoke to the owner, and the owner said to me, you've guessed it, said to me, well, if you want it, you can have it. So, which are easy things to say until you try and move something. So we thought, well, we could probably try and do something with this caboose. And we, over the course of a few months, my house mover was reluctantly called in again to attempt to move this 1913 CA caboose. Its number was 2516, and it was built in 1913 and withdrawn in 1947. When it was bought from UP after it finished its service life, it became a house for 5 years for a newly married couple. So probably the original tiny home, if you like. So we moved this one. We restored it over a number of years, moved it to the silo, and eventually had it on display. It's been used for a couple of events in town. Last year it was used for the UPHS convention, and we towed it into town, parked it outside a hotel, and it created some great attention from people and hotel owners alike. So the way we move these cars is pretty much the same. We jack them up and we crib them up, and then we slide them on beams onto trailer frames, which allows them to straighten out and allows us to restore them on a straight and level platform. Plus they're mobile as well, which makes life easier. The biggest problem we face with all of these kind of restorations is finding trucks, because they are the hardest thing of all to find. They were always sold for scrap. Cabooses and passenger cars were always put on the ground without their trucks. So the trucks are always a difficult thing. So there's a few pictures of the move, and then moving it down into the missile silo, which was about 10 years ago now that we moved into the Atlas missile silo east of Cheyenne. There are certain things that you can't always save. We have lots of people that come to us and say, we know of this car, and we know of that car, and do you want to save this one, and can you look at this one? And you can't always literally save everything. You'll end up having a junkyard of stuff that there's really no hope of restoring. So this caboose was in a scrapyard in Cheyenne, and it was built in July 1910. It was a CA caboose again, 2455. The scrapyard owners told us it was a treasured family heirloom. So when we walked inside and realized it was full to the top with aluminium drink cans, we realized it probably wasn't as treasured as we'd been led to believe. So they wanted $10,000 for it at the time. And as you can see by the roof line, there was something going on with the floor of the caboose anyway. So we left it. We just walked away from it. And then a bit later on, the scrapyard changed hands and the new owners wanted it moved, and they said, just take it. So we attempted to move it. We lifted it with a forklift in the middle, and the whole thing just fell apart. So at that stage, we just salvaged what we could, and it's helped with several restorations since. The cupboards, the doors, the windows, anything we could save, we saved, and it's gone into other cabooses. So in 2016, I was made aware on the internet of one particular caboose on a ranch in between Boulder and Lyons. There was a ranch there called Hyle Valley Ranch. And if you went on the internet, you could see that there was a caboose there on the ground. So I went down to have a look out of interest. And what was so amazing about this place was that there were 3 cabooses there, plus box cars and stock cars, all standard gauge. But the most incredible thing was that there were 3 Union Pacific cabooses there from 3 different eras. We had this one, which was 1881, a non-common standard caboose, they called them. They had the narrow cupola on them. There was a caboose from 1890, a UP one, and there was a caboose from 1901. And the likelihood of finding 3 different classes of caboose on the same site was just amazing. So I made inquiries about them, and it just so happened that the ranch had been sold to Boulder County Open Space, I think they call themselves, and they were going to turn it into a trail and walking trail and biking trail. And they wanted the cabooses moved off the property because they'd found asbestos in them. So I spoke to them and said, we could move them for you. But wouldn't it be better if you kept 1 or 2 of the freight cars and a caboose to show the history of the site and restored them, and we'll take the others? They agreed with that. They thought that was a great idea. So we worked with them over a period of probably 2 years to help stabilize the existing caboose they had, and then to remove these 2 from the site. As you can see, it had a very nice homemade roof on top as well. This was the one they kept, which I was surprised about. They actually wanted us to take that one, and I said, no, thank you. I don't think we'll be able to move that one. It's shaped a bit like Noah's Ark. So we left that one with them, and we actually helped them to restore that one. So one of the ones we took was in this series, it was 2269. This one is 2263. And when it was reintroduced in 1901, they had the drop shaded UP lettering. The caboose was yellow. The cupola looks like it was probably red at that point. And that's a view of one of those early NCS UP cabooses. This one had lost its cupola. This was 2269. And we moved that one out as well. And we have plans also for that one. And that one is now safe in Cheyenne. And there is an actual picture, believe it or not, a color photograph of the very same caboose in, I believe it was taken in 1942 near Grand Island. So the chances of finding a color photo of a caboose you actually have recovered is really remote. So we're pleased to see that picture. And that's how that one will be restored to look like in due course. We left a stock car there. They painted it. We made stenciling for it to make it accurate. They left a box car there. There's the side of the stock car with its original OSL and UP lettering and numbering. There's the 2199, 2100 series caboose that they kept. And this was the 1901 caboose on its way back to Cheyenne We actually overtook people on the interstate with that, and they were quite surprised. And this was the one they kept. And you can see how twisted and what a terrible shape it was in. And they actually did a really good job on it. This was the interior of one of the ones we saved. They were full of horse tack and junk and rats' nests and chickens' nests and, chickens and eggs and all sorts of stuff in there. It was just a mess. You can see the original stove position on the right-hand side, and the benches were still in there as well, which was quite unusual to find. There's a few more views of them. There's the stove area. And this was after cleanup when we got it back to Cheyenne. And it's actually in really good shape inside, considering how long it's been neglected for. This was the earlier caboose, and you can see the ceiling is compromised by snow load. Snow load had broken several of the roof arches over the years, so we had to help support that while we got it back. But that's the interior of the earlier caboose. The UP caboose book, which was written by Jim Ehrenberger, is really good, and it actually has this one listed as 1881, renumbered in 1881 and rebuilt in 1885. And I'll come back to that in a short while. What was surprising in the cabooses was the amount of stuff that was left inside them, including the original cast wash basin and water tank stand. And normally with all the other cabooses we've saved, those things are all stripped out and sold for scrap. So that was a really nice find, and it's unbelievably heavy. This was the interior of one of the NCS cabooses, showing the narrow cupola before the CA style wide cupola came out and was introduced. That's the ice box in there and the lamp storage. And then on the wall in the background would have been the emergency cabinet for the torpedoes and fusees and things like that. And of course, the famous dry hopper toilet, which we haven't yet used. So this was caboose 2095, the 1880 caboose, when we got it back into the silo and started stripping it down to see what we actually had left or didn't have left. So what was interesting about this caboose? Well, let me show you this. This is the caboose that was left behind. This was the work that Boulder County did to restore and stabilize that one, which was really well done. Shows the framing of those early cabooses really well. Very, very little metalwork whatsoever in the frames. Just some tie rods and some bolts, and that's all there was. And that's how it looked when they'd finished with it. We numbered it and lettered it for them, provided the correct stenciling and the paint. So you can see the change there between before and after. So when we got 2095 back to the silo and we started digging into it, we thought, well, let's check it is 2095. So we went through the paintwork above the door, which is the best place to find any kind of numbers on a caboose, especially UP ones. And as you can see, it's had about probably 7 repaints in its life. You can see the later font at the bottom and the earlier font at the top, but nothing earlier than the number 2095. Now, we understood from the book that it was originally 1124, numbered 1124, but there was no sign of that number. We were hoping to find something, but it's obviously been pretty well rebuilt in 1885. So as we started tearing the siding off, we suddenly started to realize that we were seeing things that didn't really make too much sense to us. So what you're looking at here in the sides are windowsill slots that were covered over by siding in the body side. We knew it had a replacement center sill because you can see some really nice holes and you can see some really butchered holes where a new center sill had been fitted in its life as well. But what it turned out to be was that we were looking at a caboose from the 1870s and not the 1880s. 1124 was one of the round cupola 6-window UP cabooses from the very earliest days. Now, we were staggered because nobody ever thought that one of these could ever exist still. And clearly this is what we had. So this caboose became really special, and it will end up being restored to its 1870s appearance, with a round cupola and with horizontal siding instead of vertical. It will have the way car lettering on the sides. And as of yet, we still don't know how they were configured inside, because there's not a single drawing in existence for the interior of these cars, or the exterior actually, and only a handful of photographs. So it's very much a archaeology project, this one, and we're pulling things up and just trying to see whether there's shadows of furniture and shadows of cupboards and things to see how these cabooses were configured inside. We assume they must have had a single seat in the cupola that rotated, and they must have climbed a ladder in the middle of the car to get up to the cupola. So that gives you some idea of how special this caboose really is and how it will look when it's finished. And this is a picture of 1112, which is a sister car to the one that we have in Cheyenne. And that's exactly how we will finish this one. The trucks are much smaller even than caboose trucks, so they'll have to be built from scratch, I would imagine, because the chances of finding those is going to be nil. And back then, these cabooses were a wine red color, and the drop shaded lettering, we're going to have to do some research into what colors that was back then and what they used to get the colors accurate as we possibly can. So this is the caboose later on. It got rid of the lighthouse type cupola, and they got the narrow NCS style cupolas later on. So this is probably the 1881 rebuild, where it retained its windows, 6 windows, but had a different cupola. Then later on, it lost the middle window, which was when they put the lockers in at the sides of the caboose, but it still retained the square cupola and also the lantern housing on top as well. And then later on, they were resided again. They went back to, or became a 3-window caboose with the same cupola. This was taken in Cheyenne, and this is one of the later series cabooses when it was delivered brand new in Cheyenne. And in the background, you can see one of the slightly different, longer lighthouse style cupola cabooses as well. This is later on. This is 2096, so 2095 sister in 1939. So that's the story of the cabooses. We've kind of got into cabooses by accident, really, but there's such a fascinating thing, and we find that so many people that visit have no clue what a caboose even was, which is quite shocking to those of us that have been around for a long time. And of course, these now are telling a story about a long lost part of railway history. So we get lots of people talking to us and saying, well, I know of this car and I've heard about this one. And have you seen this one? And one day when we were down in the Pullman car, when it was on show down in Cheyenne for a short while, 2 gentlemen walked in and said, oh, so you've got car 57. They said, we've got car 56. So I'm thinking, well, that's strange. And they said, but it's narrower than your one. It's not as wide as this one. So I'm thinking, okay, 56 and it's narrow. What could it be? Well, I didn't follow it up. They wanted to sell the remains of the car to me, and I wasn't in a position to get myself into even more trouble. So we didn't hear any more about it. And then about probably four years later, on Facebook Marketplace, there was an advert for the 2 ends of a car down near Loveland in a field that had been abandoned by the owners, and the owners of the land wanted them removed from the property. So I went down to have a look, and it turned out that the 2 ends of the car were the 2 ends of this car, which was Denver South Park 3 Geneva. And Geneva had had a sad life after the Denver South Park. It had been used on a farm for many years, and then it had been recovered, and it went to the Sundown and Southern, which some of you may well remember, which was kind of a fairly fleeting attempt at a railroad on a brownfield site. And the car had collapsed whilst it was in storage on that site. Here's a picture of Geneva in later years on the Sundown and Southern, and it was sold at auction, and two brothers bought it, and they cut the ends off and left the middle, which was unsalvageable by that time, took the ends to a field near Loveland and left them there. So these are the two ends of Denver South Park 3. So we recovered them because it seemed sad not to. And I donated one end to the Como Roundhouse, which is where it is right now. And I have the other end up in Cheyenne, and eventually we may connect them, or they may just be the longest narrow gauge car in the history of narrow gauge cars, being probably 200 miles apart. But they still had some nice features inside. It still had the market tree above the doors, which was really nice to see, and some other nice features, but not very much of them left. But we saved it regardless because it seems wrong not to, being such a historical car. So then we move on to something else that cropped up in 2018. We were made aware of a project that was going out for bid from the city of Arvada. And it was the story of Trolley 04, which was one of the trolleys used between Arvada and Golden. Built in 1911, originally narrow gauge and then made standard gauge later on. And it had an amazing life. It was the last trolley in operation before the Denver system shut down in 1950. And it was then used as a mounting cabin. It was saved by the Forney Museum. Then they decided that they weren't going to keep it and they were going to destroy the trolleys that they had. And Wally Wirt managed to purchase it from them and put it in a storage yard in Arvada. And there it sat, gradually deteriorating over the years. Fortunately for the trolley, it came up on the 10 most endangered places in Colorado list in around, I think, 2017, maybe 2018. And it's got some funding. History Colorado and the city of Arvada got together, and with matching grants and funding, they put it out for bid for a complete restoration. So I bid this job along with Empire Carpentry in Fort Collins, who are well known in the historical house rebuilding scene and do really good work. And we won the contract, and the 04 came up to Cheyenne in August of 2019 for restoration and came to the silo. So that was the how we came to have a Denver trolley car as well. So this was it when we took the wrappings off. It was far, far worse than we ever imagined, which is kind of a slogan for restoration, really. If you think it's bad, then it'll be worse when you dig into it. That's the best way to look at it. And so began the project to restore this over a 2-year period for the city of Arvada. You can see it's sitting on trucks. They are CB&Q caboose trucks, which Wally Wirt found just to put the trolley on to make it look like it had some kind of undercarriage, which was a good idea because trolley trucks are absolutely non-existent. They're the hardest things to ever come across, especially the correct ones. Mainly because when the trolleys were sold for scrap, the trucks were worth money. So they were salvaged and scrapped. So this was how far we had to dig into this trolley. We found more and more problems the more we dug into it. We ended up like this, with the roof supported on beams and nothing between the roof and the floor. And then we had to replace all the wooden beams inside the steel frames as well, because they'd all rotted out. And also strengthen the steel. So this being a historic project, it meant that we had to work by historic guidelines. So Arvada insisted that we try and retain as much of the original fabric as we possibly could. And believe it or not, we managed to retain 95% of the sheet metal from the sides and the roof. Most of the roof was new because it had just fallen apart so badly it had to be replaced. Most of the body uprights are partially original, if not all original. We had to make some brand new ones, and they are fearfully difficult to make because they are a one-piece oak upright with numerous rebates in them for the windows to slide down and all sorts of other things. Really tricky things to build. So Empire Carpentry did a wonderful job on those. So this was the result in I think July of or August of 2021, when it was finally signed off. We actually built a brand new Denver fender for it as well to make it look complete. We got an original headlight donated. The original sign box in the front was donated by a trolley enthusiast in Washington whose father worked for Denver Tramways. The trolley pole was donated by Fort Collins, the trolley group there. And we found a complete barn full of 34 Denver Tramway trolley seats in Strasbourg at Jeff Thane's place over there. So we bought all of those. So it has a full complement of seats as well as everything else. So the entire project came together really, really well in the end, and I'm really proud of it, and I think it looks superb. And eventually, when Arvada get the site sorted out as to where it's going to end up down there, it will be on display under a roof somewhere in a prominent place in Arvada, which is where it should be. They wanted it restored to its condition as of 1950. So it has sheet metal sides and just plain yellow paint. And they wanted all the dings and dents left in the metalwork as well to make it look like it was on the last day of service. And I think between us all, we achieved what they wanted, and they were really pleased with it. It's still in storage in the silo as of today. So if any of you wish to come up and see it, you'll be more than welcome to. We had a 12-volt lighting system installed with antique bulbs so that the interior is lit as well. And we've got a lot of the original controls back in there just for show. So that was the trolley story. Some of you may know that there is actually a Denver South Park car in existence, a complete one, minus trucks. It's fairly well hidden because it's in Wyoming. It's 100 miles north of Cheyenne, and it's the only remaining Denver South Park car in existence. And this is Denver South Park 7 Como. Now, Como was converted to a baggage car later in life, and this is the way you see it right now. It had an amazing life story. It was turned into a standard gauge scale test coach with standard gauge trucks and roamed around the system. And then at some point, a section house in Hoover, Wyoming, which is near Wheatland, burnt down, and the CNS decided to send this narrow gauge car body up there as a new section house. And it was due to be demolished. It was derelict when the owner of the ranch that it's on now, his grandmother found it, fell in love with it, and moved it to their ranch and restored it. So it's an incredible save. And unbeknown to them, they had no idea what an important save they were making. So last year, I got a call from the owner, who I've been friends with for a long time, checking in on the car and making sure it's okay and everything else, to repaint it into a period correct color scheme for them. So during the course of that, I uncovered some amazing lettering on the sides of the car. This was the W, E, and L of Wells Fargo, which you can see on the side of the baggage wall, which was fantastic to find because it gave me the exact measurements of lettering that was on the car to copy for when we repainted it. This is the interior of the car. Really hardly touched at all. It's just in incredible shape. They've added a partition in the middle, which is not a bad thing because it helps to support the roof quite happily. They've added an extravagant roof over the top, which helps the car as well. Has kept it in really good shape. And then greatest thing of all, of course, was under the paint on one end, it was the original Denver South Park scroll work, which again, nobody has ever seen, and nobody would ever have known what it looked like if this car hadn't have been saved. So you can see the original number 7 down below, really extravagant kind of number 7, and then the DSP and P above it, and the number 28, which is what it became later on under CNS ownership. So years ago, I had mixed up by Sherwin-Williams in Cheyenne the correct Pullman green for my restorations, and they made an incredibly good job of it. In fact, it's so good that the Railroad Museum in Golden now use it as their standard Pullman green and the CNS green for all of their cars as well, which is nice to know that you can get something that accurate. So we decided it should go back to the CNS green as it would have looked when it was retired. And there's another better view of it in a different light. The Pullman green or the CNS green is amazing because it changes color in different lights dramatically. It's a beautiful color, it really is. And sometimes it can even look brown as well, which is one of its characteristics. So this is how we finished it. I finished it with the Wells Fargo & Co. Express and the 129 number, which was an earlier number it carried, on one side. And then on the other side, we put Adams Express Company and the number 28. So this is how it looked in 2 periods of its life. So that was a really nice job that came in last year that I really enjoyed doing because it was saving something that's vitally important to look after. We found several other things that we, as a non-profit, we would like to perhaps preserve in the future. One of which is this depot, which is the original car depot from Car, Colorado. It's been on a farm since it was moved in 1964. At one part of the depot, the baggage portion was built into the house, and the depot itself, this original part, is left up on blocks and has a completely original interior with the grill for the ticket desk. It has a ticket desk drawers with all the inserts for money and stuff like that inside as well. And this is something that we hope to save at some point in the future. It measures about 16 by 24, so it's not a huge building, but it's going to be a challenging move for us, and we'll need somewhere to put it as a permanent exhibit. There's a picture of the depot at Car as was, and it's the left-hand end that survives, and the right-hand end is built into the house on site as well. So there's a few more views of that. This is an overall view of the silo, which is where the non-profit keeps its rolling stock and keeps the cars that we've saved. I also have a for-profit branch, and we are currently doing a contract, which I'll show you some pictures of in a while. So we take on work for other people as well, which helps to fund some of the non-profit projects also. In fact, the Rocky Mountain Railroad Club, we received a grant from them a couple of years ago to help with the restoration of that 1870 caboose as well. So we really appreciate your help in that. Here's another view of the silo. Originally, it held an Atlas missile from 1959 to about 1967. And the missile laid down inside the silo here, and the roof was opened up, and the missile stood up for a launch, which fortunately never happened. Another car that we're looking at, there's a box car also on site at Car, which is a UP California Fast Freight Line box car from 1881. And that's another save that we're keeping an eye on, just to make sure that it doesn't go anywhere and we can look after it when the time arrives. You can see some of the California Fast Freight Line writing on there. And it's also lettered Union Pacific Railway, which is interesting as well. So we had a phone call about 4 years ago from the UPHS in Cheyenne, the Union Pacific Historical Society, to say that a lady who lived near Wheatland had got a boxcar on her property and she was going to destroy it, but she really wanted to see if anybody wanted to save it first. So I duly went out to have a look at it and found that it was a really early Colorado and Southern car at that point. And so we formulated a plan to try and save this early 34-foot boxcar. It was actually in better condition than it looks. What was fascinating, if you notice on the left-hand end, you'll notice it says the Colorado Road. That slogan was used only up until 1902. So we had to save that. If nothing else, we had to save that slogan and that logo because it's so rare. So we got it up onto a trailer frame. We hauled it back about 60 miles to Cheyenne looking like that, which alarmed quite a few motorists, and got it home. And we have plans to restore that in the future. We found UP lettering on it. Inside it's lettered for UPD&G and also UP. So we believe it goes back to at least 1883. And it had actually been on the ground at Horse Creek since 1904. So it'd been on the ground for well over 110 years. And there's the logo, which I saved, put it back together and sympathetically restored so that we at least have a copy of that logo for future use, and something that we can look at and measure and keep as a record. There's some of the numbers we found inside, 27249, and the original early, very, very early UP font as well. So it's not often we make appeals. We try and fund everything we can ourselves because as a non-profit, we understand that demands on people's money is great from many non-profits. Just in the last 2 weeks, this trolley car has come up as in desperate need of saving. This one is remarkable. It's Denver 319. And believe it or not, it's 8,000 feet up on Casper Mountain, of all places. It's the furthest traveled Denver trolley, we believe, in existence. And we were made aware of this by Dave Schaff, and we went to look at it and got in touch with the owner, and he was somewhat reticent about letting it go, and he said he wanted money for it. And I hate paying for anything like this because it costs us so much money to move it that the kindest thing an owner can do is just give it to us. So this one now has got to be moved when the snow has gone, which means probably June sometime. We have to think about moving this one out. Otherwise, it's going to be demolished because the land has been sold. And it's actually in incredible shape. I'll show you some more photos. This is the rear end of the trolley with the wood siding still in place. It had a hot tub in there at one time as well, but not in service with Denver Tramways. So it's had since some use. It's a really important trolley because it actually broke the 4-day transit strike in 1919. It was the first car out of the car barn to break that strike. So from my point of view, I think that's a really important social side to the history of this trolley car. Some amazing things inside still. Everything's as clear as day in there, all the signs, and it still has the ceilings intact as well. So this is one that we really hope that we can get help to save. If we can't get help to save it, we have to save it anyway, regardless. But it's just one of those things we have to do. So if you do think it's something you'd like to get involved in, please get in touch with us and we'll see if we can't get this down off the mountain and back to Cheyenne, and then hopefully back on display in Denver somewhere appropriate in due course. So as I said, Vintage Rail Restorations is the for-profit company that I run, that I started several years ago. And we're currently working for a museum in Oregon, the Collier Logging Museum, to restore 3 log cars that were burnt in a fire in 2020. If you notice in the background, there's the remains of a log loading machine as well. And we have to rebuild that also, but on site. So we bid the contract that came out, and nobody else in the US bid it whatsoever. And we won the contract because of that, which seems obvious really. And we brought the remains of the 3 cars back to Cheyenne in August. and started to work out what we had amongst the scrap metal and the measurements for the cars and everything else, and trying to rebuild them as to how they were pre-fire. So that's what we're working on right now. They're 40-foot standard gauge flat cars built by Seattle Car and Foundry in around 1920. They're mainly wood with steel bunks. We had to order 17 10 by 10 by 40 fir beams to rebuild these cars with, which, as you can imagine, isn't your regular Home Depot lumber order. So we had to have that specially made in Oregon as well and delivered here. So the first car is well on its way to completion, and we have to have all 3 cars and the log loader rebuilt by July of 2024. This was a recent picture after we got the first truck under the rear end of one of the cars. And there's the first car as it stands at the moment in the shop. So that really brings everything up to date. That's the story of the nonprofit, the story of what we're trying to do in Cheyenne to save history and to save history for future generations and to teach people about railway history, which is fast disappearing. The classic railway history is a thing of the past. So thank you very much. I appreciate you being here, and that's the end of my story, I would say.
Mike, have you got time to take some questions?
Yeah, sure, absolutely.
Let me get some lights here. Anybody have any questions you've thought of from watching this presentation? As Mike mentioned, that number 319 car, I was on a job up near Casper several years ago, and I happened to be up that mountain, and there's this sort of a little ski area up there, and I was going down some dirt road and happened to look out into the trees, and I said, that kind of looks like a yellow Denver trolley. And, I crawled around it, and I don't know, I guess 2 or 3 weeks later, Mike, I called you and I said, have you ever heard of this? And I don't think Mike was surprised, because stuff kind of comes out of the prairies and the woodwork anyway up there. But now, years later, somebody looks like they're ready to get rid of it. But like Mike said, it's expensive to move. And if he doesn't move it, they'll probably just wreck it or burn it down or something. Brian, you have a question. The 319 car that we're talking about is on a mountain about 8,000 feet in altitude near Casper. Yeah, Casper, Wyoming. Like Mike said, it's probably, as far as we know, the longest distance any existing Denver tramway car has gone. And he hopes to get it to his lovely missile silo there, where at least it's out of the rain, so.
Yeah, it's at least safe until we have spoken to Englewood Historical Society about whether they could do something with it, because it would be appropriate there, because that's where it used to run. But as with most historical societies, it all comes down to grant money and all that kind of stuff. So it could be a while.
I think she's got a question. Oh. Well, he won't hear it if I don't give you a mic. So
I was just going to ask, you had mentioned.
hold it up tight, close.
Oh,
there you go.
sorry. You were talking about 319 and how, and something needed to be done quickly. What is your deadline, and how much are you looking to raise?
Well, I think we haven't really got proper figures yet, but I would imagine the trucking itself, if we use good old Steve Disher, is going to be, I would think, probably somewhere in the region of 10 to 15,000, because he's coming up from Denver to come and get it. So I'd imagine that's probably what we're looking at to actually retrieve it. The owner wants money for it, and I've tried to explain to him that it's going to cost a lot to retrieve it. And if we can get some kind of financial, some kind of money for him for it, we'll try to, but I can't guarantee it.
Another question.
So, Mike, have you done any restoration in steam? It seems to me I saw you in Holiday Park at one point next to the locomotive.
No, only in that I'm rebuilding a cab for a locomotive for Sammy King. It was a locomotive that was in Strasbourg, and it's an 042, I think. And he's getting me to rebuild the cab whilst the boiler is being built in Canada and the frames are back east, I believe in Pennsylvania. So I try not to get involved too much apart from cosmetic stuff. We do work for Douglas Museum every year. So we're trying to keep maintenance going on their equipment up there, which will involve the CB&Q loco up there as well. So we're hoping to get some work done on that in the next few months also to make it look prettier than it does right now.
So for those that don't know, you're talking about the Railroad Museum in Douglas, Wyoming, right?
Douglas, Wyoming, yes.
Another question? Anyone? I guess we sort of have a Rocky Mountain Railroad Club connection to the you had mentioned that some of those seats for that one car came from Thane's Ranch, and the Rocky Club had been out there for picnics several times, you know, and that was the seats are in the 04 now.
They're in the 04 now,
Yeah,
and I have extra seats, which is really nice because potentially they could go in 319.
Oh yeah, and as you said, the 04 had been owned by Wally Wirt, who
That's
does
right.
he does the picture page for the club on our website. He's still a member.
Right.
I think he still writes articles for Progressive Railroad magazine.
Amazing guy. He's gone so far out of his way to save that trolley. It's been a real good result for him.
Yeah.
I was going to ask, since you mentioned the Thanes, do you know what happened to the Denver tramway work motor body that they had?
It's still there, I believe. It was in the auction, and then it didn't. I don't think it achieved its reserve, and I believe it's still there.
All right.
Yeah.
These trolley seats that he's talking about, they had kept them in the barn on their ranch. Some of you may have been out there. They had a 15-inch gauge railroad that ran around their farm out there where we had gone out there as a club picnic and rode around on their trains, and they had a steam engine and several other pieces, you know.
Yeah, they still do. The railroad is still there.
Yeah, sort of a big figure 8 thing, and they had built a tunnel and all of that.
Yeah.
And it was right next to the UP line. So I know that when the UP steam team came through there with the big boy a few years ago, they stopped and whistled off. And and I believe Rob just passed away in the last couple of years. And like you said, his son Jeff helped you get those seats. So
yeah, it's tremendous find.
Kind of a small world.
Really amazing find.
Yeah. Do we have any questions on Zoom or YouTube or something? Yeah, they're saying you should apply for a grant, Michael. Oh.
Well, that's just what I was thinking. So yes, you may find
somebody that we were telling us earlier that's trying to throw money out, you know. So
that's right. I will be in touch.
And also, you know, feel free to put the contact information out there if anybody who is watching now or sees this later wants to get in contact with you about 319 or other projects.
Okay. All right. I will do that.
How would they reach you?
Well, I post on the Rocky Mountain Railroad Club Facebook page quite often. My email is the easiest one is the Crow Creek 66 at gmail.com. That's CROWCREEK 66 at gmail.com. That's the easiest one to contact me on. Dave has my number, which he's welcome to pass out to people as well. So
yeah. Any questions over here? And as he was talking about this missile silo that he's currently occupying is sort of off the beaten path, but that's a good thing. And it was a horizontal missile silo, and it was set up to where if they needed to launch, the roof would flop 2 sections, then they would elevate the missile. And would you say it could be launched in within 30 seconds? Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
it's a 400-ton roof.
400-ton roof, and you know, if the Russians were getting silly, they could. That's
right.
Something, but as we said, luckily it never had to happen. So
yeah, and any of the club members are welcome to come and visit. You know, we don't charge for visits. You're welcome to make arrangements and come and visit anytime you're in the area, or if you want to make a special trip, you're always welcome.
And Andy was asking what kind of missile was in there.
It was an Atlas.
Atlas.
Yeah.
And were they Minutemen or just Atlas?
Just Atlas.
So, and think there was several of those silos up in that area, and they sort of played a shell game with the missiles. You didn't know which silos
Right.
were empty
Exactly.
and which ones had the missiles in them, and
Yeah.
they were mounted on trailers, and they moved them around under cover of darkness, and
That's right. Yeah,
all
exactly.
all
that.
those Cold War hijinks.
Yeah, yeah, it's fantastic.
If anybody online has got a question, I open it up. Feel free to unmute yourself.
Pat's got a question.
Oh, Pat's got a question too.
I didn't quite see in the picture how the access into the silo is. Is there a garage door off on the side?
There's a door at one end. It's a about 23 by 25 door, which rolls up on one end, which was how they put the missiles in there in the first place.
Okay.
So we've had it jerry rigged because all the sites were 3-phase power, and we don't have that. So we have a Ford pickup truck with a chain working the door. So you just have to
Oh,
improvise
wow.
when you're a non-profit.
And as he tries to keep it pretty well buttoned up, because you guys may know that it gets a little windy up in Wyoming. You know. Luckily, his door is on the east end.
It is, yeah, fortunately.
So also, he's talking about the company that might do some moves for him. Disher has done a lot of moves for the folks in Como and the Colorado Railroad Museum. I think that was the company that hauled RGS 20 down to Antonito when it got to go make a guest run a while back. And coming back to that, I think the RGS 20 and probably the 491 will be hot out at the museum in May for our picnic. Michael, you'll have to see if you can come down for our picnic.
Yeah, okay. Absolutely.
I might be able to hook you up with a dinner since you did a show for us. So
Okay.
there'd be a trade since you couldn't get here today.
That's right. Sounds good.
Well, I guess if there's no other questions, we'll let Mike get packed up, because I'm sure he's got another big day tomorrow.
Yep, it's going to be hot tomorrow, 74 or something, or 80, I don't know. Amazing.
Yeah, it was one more question, Pat. Go ahead. Or
On those Denver tramway trolleys, did you know who originally built?
They're built by Wober in Denver.
oh yeah, Wober Car Company,
Yeah.
same as Car 25.
Yeah.
All right, that's amazing that those two are out there that we know of, the 04 and the 319. So.
Yeah, and yeah, it is fascinating. There's several others. They had quite a good survival record, really, considering how many there were.
We
So-
found one more question here, Michael.
Yep.
Go ahead, Brian.
I got over here from Grand Junction about September of 1949 to go to the DU Speech Center, where I was just to the north of here is where I went to school, the DU Denver University Speech Clinic. I remember coming out here from downtown Denver, at first on the streetcars, and then in October 22nd of that same year, they replaced the streetcars on the number 8 line with the Merman Harrington and Brill trolley buses.
Right.
And I wish you had one. There's one down in Colorado Springs,
Yeah.
a former Denver Tramway Brill down in Colorado Springs. I wish you had seen one of the Merman Harringtons. I haven't seen one of those for some time. And they still have, there's one restored in San Francisco, by the way.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're pretty buses. The trolley buses were nice as well.
Oh yeah. I'm Brian
Yeah.
Gould, and I'm glad to meet you.
Thank you. Nice to meet you too.
I like you very much.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks, Michael.
Thank you. Thank you all.
We look forward to you coming back and giving us another presentation someday when you have updates or
Yeah, well, and I'll
more
do
cars,
that in person
more
as
cars
well.
coming out of the prairie, something
Yeah,
like that.
we'll do that in person. That'd be great.
Okay. Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. Thanks.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
You're getting a round of applause now.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Well,